7, 22, 24, 26, 29, 30, 32, 34, 35. For a time until the erection of the tabernacle, the tent of Moses served as a temporary sanctuary. It was because the cloud, representing Jehovah's presence, stationed itself at likely, in front of the entrance of this tent whenever Moses entered, and Jehovah communicated with Moses there. It was called the tent of meeting, evidently because the people had to go there to inquire of Jehovah, and thus, in effect, they met Jehovah there. Acts 33. 7-11. Apparently for the same reason the sacred tabernacle was termed the tent of meeting. See tabernacle. Tent of the testimony. See tabernacle. 10 words. This translation of the Hebrew expression asrith had middle.rim, found only in the Pentateuch, designates the 10 basic laws of the law covenant, commonly called the 10 Commandments. Acts 34. 28. 4. 13. 10. For this special code of laws is also spoken of as the words the 5. 22 and as the words of the covenant. Acts 34. 28. The Greek Septuagint. Acts 34. 28. The 10. 4 reads Deka 10 logos words, from which combination the word Decalogue is derived. Source of tablets. The 10 words were first orally given at Mount Sinai by the angel of Jehovah. Acts 20. 1. 31. 18. 5. 22. 9. 10. Acts 7. 38, 53. See also G 3. 19. Heb 2. 2. Moses then ascended the mountain to receive the 10 words in written form on 2 stone tablets, along with other commandments and instructions. During his extended 40-day stay, the people grew restless and made a molten calf to worship. Descending the mountain, Moses saw this spectacle of idolatry and threw down the tablets that were the workmanship of God, the very tablets upon which the 10 words had been written, and shattered them. Acts 24. 12. 31. 18. 32. 19. 9. 8-17. Compare Lu 11. 20. Jehovah later told Moses, "Carve out for yourself 2 tablets of stone like the first ones, and I must write upon the tablets the words that appeared on the first tablets, which you shattered." Acts 34. 1-4. And so after another 40 days spent in the mountain, a duplicate copy of the 10 words was obtained. These were kept by Moses in an ark of acacia wood. The 10. 1-5. The 2 tablets were called the tablets of the covenant. 9. 9, 11, 15. Evidently this is why the gold overlaid ark later made by Bezalel, in which the tablets were eventually kept, was called the Ark of the Covenant. Jos 3. 6, 11. 8. 33. JG 20. 27. Hub 9. For this legislation of the 10 words was also called the Testimony. X 25. 16, 21. 40. 20. And the O Textoi Acute Miritra Longo, 10 words 1086. Contents of the Commandments. By way of an introduction to these 10 words is the forthright statement in the first person. I am Jehovah your God, who have brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slaves. Acts 20. 2. This not only states who is speaking to whom but shows why the Decalogue was especially given to the Jews at that time. It was not given to Abraham. The 5. 2, 3. The first commandment, you must not have any other gods against my face, put Jehovah first. Acts 20. 3. It involved his lofty office and unique position as God Almighty, the Most High, the Supreme Sovereign. This commandment indicated that the Israelites were not to have any other gods as rivals to Jehovah. The second commandment was a natural follow-up of the first in that it forbade idolatry in any shape or form as an open affront to Jehovah's glory and personage. You must not make a carved image or a form like anything in the heavens, on the earth, or in the waters under the earth, nor are you to bow down to or serve them. This prohibition is underscored with the declaration, because I Jehovah your God am a God exacting exclusive devotion. X 20. 4-6. The third commandment, in its proper and logical sequence, declared, you must not take up the name of Jehovah your God in a worthless way. X 20. 7. This harmonizes with the prominence attached to Jehovah's name throughout the Hebrew Scriptures 6,979 times in NW. See Jehovah importance of the name. Within just these few verses of the 10 words X 20. 2-17, the name occurs 8 times. The phrase not take up has the thought of not pronounce or not lift up carry. To do this to God's name in a worthless way would be to lift up that name to a falsehood, or in vain. The Israelites who were privileged to bear Jehovah's name as his witnesses and who became apostate were in effect taking up and carrying about Jehovah's name in a worthless way. Isra 43. 10. S 36. 20, 21. The fourth commandment stated, remembering the Sabbath day to hold it sacred, you are to render service and you must do all your work 6 days. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to Jehovah your God. You must not do any work, you nor your son nor your daughter, your slave man nor your slave girl, nor your domestic animal, nor your alien resident who is inside your gates. X 20. 8-10. By their holding this day as holy to Jehovah, all, even the slaves and the domestic animals, would have the benefit of refreshing rest. The Sabbath day also provided opportunity to concentrate on spiritual matters without distraction. The fifth commandment, honor your father and your mother, may be viewed as linking together the first 4, which define man's duties toward God, and the remaining commandments, which set forth man's obligations towards fellow creatures. For since parents serve as God's representatives, by keeping the fifth command one is honoring and obeying both the Creator and those creatures upon whom God has conferred authority. This command was the only one of the 10 with a promise attached. In order that your days may prove long upon the ground that Jehovah your God is giving you. X 20. 12. D5. 16. F6. 2, 3. The next commandments in the code were stated very tersely. The 6th, you must not murder. The 7th, you must not commit adultery. The 8th, you must not steal. X 20. 13-15. This is the way these laws are listed in the Masoretic text. From laws dealing with crimes causing the greatest harm to one's neighbor to the one causing the least, in that order. In some Greek manuscripts Codex Alexandrinus, Codex Ambrosianus the order is murder, theft, adultery. Philo the Decalogue, 12:51 has adultery, murder, theft. The Codex Vaticanus, adultery, theft, murder. Going next from deeds to words, the ninth says, you must not testify falsely as a witness against your fellow man. X 20. 16. The 10th commandment O textui acute miritra longo, Teraphim 1087 10th against coveting his house, and so forth. Augustine sought to support his theoretical division on the later parallel listing of the Decalogue at Deuteronomy 5. 6-21, where 2 different Hebrew words in verse 21 are found. Neither must you desire form of heb. Mad. Neither must you selfishly crave form of heb. Wa, rather than on the earlier text in Exodus 20. 17, where just the one verb desire occurs twice. There are other minor differences in the wording between the parallel enumerations of the 10 commandments in Exodus and Deuteronomy, but these in no way affect the force or the meaning of the laws. Whereas, in the former listing, the 10 words are stated in formal legislative style, its later repetition is more narrative in form, for on the latter occasion Moses was merely rehearsing God's commandment in the way of a reminder. The 10 words also appear elsewhere in still other variations, for they were often quoted or cited along with other instructions by Bible writers of both the Hebrew and Christian Greek scriptures. X 31. 14. 34. 14, 17, 21. 19. 3, 11, 12. D4. 15-19. 6. 14, 15. Mount 5. 27. 15. 4. Lu 18. 20. Row 13. 9. F6. 2, 3. The 10 words were God-given, hence comprise a perfect law code. When a man versed in the law asked Jesus Christ, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Jesus quoted a command that, in effect, epitomized the first 4 or possibly 5 of the 10 commandments, saying, "You must love Jehovah your God with your whole heart and with your whole soul and with your whole mind." The rest of the Decalogue, Jesus then summed up in the few words of another command. You must love your neighbor as yourself. Mount 22. 35-40. The 6. 5. The 19. 18. Christians not under Decalogue. Jesus was born under the law, and he kept it perfectly, finally giving up his life as a ransom for mankind. 4. 1 Joe 2. 2 Furthermore, by his death on the torture stake, he freed those under the law including the basic 10 words or commandments by becoming a curse instead of them. His death provided for the blotting out of the handwritten document, it being nailed to the torture stake. 3. 13. Col 2. 13, 14. Nevertheless, a study of the law with its 10 words is essential for Christians, for it reveals God's viewpoint of matters, and it had a shadow of the good things to come, of the reality that belongs to the Christ. Heb 10. 1. Col 2. 17. Gil 6. 2 Christians are not without law toward God, but under law toward Christ. 1 Co 9. 21 But they are not condemned as sinners by that law, for the undeserved kindness of God through Christ provides forgiveness for their errors due to fleshly weakness. Row 3. 23, 24. Tetrah possibly from the Babylonian, meaning ibex. 1. Abraham's father, the 8th generation from Shem. Lu 3. 34. GE 11. 10-24. 1 Ch1. 24-26 Terah, through his sons Abraham, Nahor, and Haran, became a forefather of numerous tribes. GE 11. 27. 22. 20-24. 25. 1-4, 13-15. 1 Ch1. 28-42. 2. 1, 2 Terah began having children at 70. While Abraham is listed first, this appears to be because he is the most famous of Terah's sons rather than the firstborn. When Terah died at 205, Abraham was only 75, so Terah must have been 130 when Abraham was born. GE 11. 26, 32. 12. 4 Sarah was Abraham's half-sister, likely a daughter of Terah by a different wife. GE 20. 12 Terah's firstborn was most likely Haran, whose daughter was old enough to marry Terah's other son Nahor. GE 11. 29. Terah lived in Ur of the Chaldeans, and there his family grew up. GE 11. 28 According to Joshua 24. 2. Terah at one time worshipped gods other than Jehovah, perhaps the moon god Sin, the favored deity of Ur. Nonetheless, when Jehovah called Abraham to leave Ur, Terah's family went along to Haran, where they all lived until after his death about 1943 BCE. GE 11. 31, 32. Acts 7. 2-4. 2. One of the camps isotextoi acute miritra longo, Teresh 1088 respect to inheritance rights would also explain why Laban was so anxious to recover them, even to the point of taking his brothers with him and pursuing Jacob for a distance of 7 days' journey. GE 31. 19-30 Of course, what Rachel had done was completely unknown to Jacob. GE 31. 32, and there is no indication that he ever attempted to use the teraphim to gain the inheritance from Laban's sons. Jacob had nothing to do with idols. At the latest, the teraphim would have been disposed of when Jacob had all the foreign gods turned over to him by his household under the big tree that was close to Shechem. GE 35. 1-4. In Israel the idolatrous use of teraphim existed in the days of the judges as well as the kings. JG 17. 5. 18. 14, 17, 20. Ho 3. For it is not likely, though, that the teraphim served for purposes of inheritance in Israel, in view of God's express command against the making of images. X 20. For also, the prophet Samuel spoke of teraphim in parallel with uncanny power, comparing the use of both to pushing ahead presumptuously. 1 Sa 15. 23. And the teraphim were among the appendages of idolatry cleared out of Judah and Jerusalem by faithful King Josiah. 2 Kai 23. 24. Hence, the fact that Michal, the wife of David, had a teraphim image among her possessions suggests that her heart was not complete with Jehovah, and that David either did not know about her having the teraphim image or else tolerated it because she was the daughter of King Saul. 1 Sa 19. 12, 13. Teresh. One of two doorkeepers in the Persian palace who conspired against King Ahasuerus. Upon learning of the plot, Mordecai informed Queen Esther who, in turn, revealed it to the king. Teresh and his accomplice were hanged on a stake, and the incident was entered in the royal records. As 2. 21-23. 6. 1, 2. Tertius from Lat. Meaning third. The writer or transcriber of Paul's letter to the Romans, and the only one of Paul's secretaries identified by name. Tertius inserts his own personal greetings to the Romans. Row 16. 22. Datullus Tullus from Lat. Diminutive of Tertius. A public speaker who presented the Jews' case against Paul before Governor Felix in Caesarea. Of what Luke recorded, much of Datullus' statement personally praises Felix, with only a very brief accusation against Paul, attempting to implicate him with the frequent seditions against Rome. Act 24. 1-8 Nothing definite is known as to Datullus' nationality, whether Jewish or Roman. Testicles. Male genital glands. God's law to Israel barred from the priesthood a man having his testicles broken, as one of several disqualifying physical defects. La 21. 17-21, 23 This high standard for the priesthood was in harmony with the holiness of the office of the priests as representatives of Jehovah's holiness before Israel. It likewise accords with the fact that Israel's priesthood symbolized the heavenly priesthood of Christ and his congregation of under-priests, among whom there is found no blemish. Heb 7. 26. F5. 27. Re 14. 1, 5. 20. 6 Furthermore, God wanted priests who could have children to succeed them. The law provided, however, that such a defective person could eat of the holy things provided for the sustenance of the priesthood. La 21. 21, 22. For similar reasons an animal having its testicles squeezed, crushed, cut off, or pulled off could not be offered up as a sacrifice. La 22. 24. Compare Mal 1. 6-8. 1p1. 19. On this account the Israelites did not castrate their animals, for the law required that all domestic animals slaughtered for food be brought to the sanctuary to be killed and eaten as a communion offering. The same law applied in the Promised Land for those who did not live far off from Jerusalem. La 17. 3-5. La 12. 20-25. The law further read, no man castrated by crushing the testicles or having his male member cut off may come into the congregation of Jehovah. De 23. One such o text to acute miritra longo, there bears 1089 way the marriage could still be fruitful, her husband's family line being carried on through it. In the case of the Christian congregation, persons who have been castrated are not barred from entry, for the law has been set aside on the basis of Christ's sacrifice. Col 2. 13. 14 Nevertheless, the laws above quoted illustrate God's regard for the reproductive organs and strongly indicate that an operation that would destroy a person's procreative powers simply because he has no appreciation for that gift from God would be wrong. Genital organ. The Hebrew word for flesh basar is used in the scriptures at Leviticus 15. 2, 3 with reference to the man's genital organ, the penis, as separate from the testicles. See clean, cleanness. Compare ISA 57. 8. FTN. The male genital organ was an object of sex worship by pagans in ancient times, as it is today in some countries. Reference may be made at Ezekiel 8. 17 NW, FTN to such worship as infecting the apostate Israelites in Ezekiel's day. Thad is Thad middle. Deus. An apostle of Jesus Christ. Mount 10. 2, 3. Mr. 3. 18 He appears to be called elsewhere Judas the son of James. Lu 6. 16. Joe 14. 22. Ac 1. 13. See Judas No. 3. Theatre. A structure referred to by the Greeks as the amidalotron where dramatic performances, tragedies, comedies, dances, musical presentations, and spectacles were staged. The theatre was often the scene of immoral presentations, shunned by faithful Christians. F5. 3-5 But it also served as a place of public assembly for other purposes. It was to the theatre in Ephesus that Paul's travelling companions were brought when Demetrius the silversmith stirred up riot against these Christian missionaries. Though the apostle was willing to go before the people assembled in the theatre, the disciples and some friendly commissioners of festivals and games dissuaded him. Act 19. 23-31. Theatres were constructed in Greece from about the 5th century BCE onward, and in time they were built in various principal cities. Most Greek theatres were constructed in semicircular fashion on a hillside of concave formation. The seats might have been made of wood or stone. Aisles separated them into sections, and they were lined up in tiers on the hill's gradual incline. At the centre was the or middle. Khe dancing or chorus area, behind which there was a raised stage backed by SKE middle. Ne, or background. Ruins of theatres have been found in such places as Ephesus, Athens, and Corinth. The large theatre excavated at Ephesus had 66 rows of seats and could hold an audience of about 25,000 persons. The acoustics were, and still are, so good that even a low voice from the stage can be heard in the topmost row with ease. The Romans frequently constructed theatres as individual buildings dependent upon no natural sloping ground formation. Sometimes their theatres had a roof over the stage and a portion of the seating area. Another type, the Roman amphitheatre, was a roofless circular or oval structure that enclosed a large centre space or arena, from which the seats radiated in tiers. The partially standing Colosseum in Rome, finished in AD CE, is a noted Roman amphitheatre. Herod the Great constructed theatres in various cities, including Damascus and Caesarea. Josephus said that Herod built a theatre in Jerusalem, and after that a very large amphitheatre in the plain. Jewish Antiquities, 15, 268-8, 1. The Greek word the amidalotron can denote either the place where a show is presented or the theatrical spectacle itself. Paul wrote, "For it seems to me that God has put us the apostles last on exhibition as men appointed to death, because we have become a theatrical spectacle the amidalotron to the world, and to angels, and to men." 1 Co 4. 9 Paul thus alluded to the customary closing event of Roman gladiatorial contests in the amphitheatre arena when certain participants were brought out on cladotex to acute muritra longo. Theophilus 1090 His attendant put him to death so that no one could say, "It was a woman that killed him." JG 9. 50-54. 2 Sir 11. 21. Thebes is tentatively connected with modern Tubas, about 15 kilometers 9.5 mi of Shechem, although no suitable remains have been found. Theophilus the middle. Of a middle. Lust loved by God. Friend of God. The person to whom Luke addressed both his Gospel and the Acts of Apostles. Luke 1. 3, 4. Act 1. 1 His being called most excellent may indicate a high position of some kind, or it may simply be an expression of high esteem. Theophilus apparently was a Christian, having been orally taught about Jesus Christ and his ministry. Luke's written statement served to assure him of the certainty of what he had learned previously by word of mouth. Thessalonians, letters to the 2 inspired letters of the Christian Greek scriptures, perhaps the first to be composed by the Apostle Paul, who identifies himself as the writer of both. 1th 1. 2. 18. 2th 1. 3. 17. At the time these letters were committed to writing, Silvanus, Silas and Timothy were with Paul. 1th 1. 2th 1. This points to Corinth as the place from which the letters were sent, as there is no record that all three men labored together again after their stay at Corinth in the course of Paul's second missionary journey. Acts 18. 5. Since the apostles' 18-month activity in Corinth appears to have begun in the autumn of 50 CE, likely it was at about this time that the first letter was written to the Thessalonians. Acts 18. 11. See chronology, the later apostolic period. The second letter must have followed or not long thereafter, probably about 51 CE. In all outstanding catalogues of the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th centuries CE, both letters are listed as canonical. They also harmonize fully with the rest of the scriptures in admonishing God's servants to maintain fine conduct at all times. Noteworthy, too, is the emphasis placed on prayer in these letters. Paul, along with his fellow workers, always remembered the Thessalonians in prayer. 1th 1. 2. 2. 13. 2th 1. 3. 11. 2. 13. And the apostle encouraged them. Pray incessantly. In connection with everything give thanks. 1th 5. 17, 18. Brothers, continue in prayer for us. 1th 5. 25. 2th 3. 1. Encouragement and counsel to a relatively new congregation, written by Paul about 50 CE, a few months after he had left Thessalonica, because of mob violence. Commendation for the congregation. 1-10. Paul warmly commends the Thessalonians for their faithful work and endurance. The Thessalonians have become an example to other believers in accepting the word under tribulation, and with the joy that God's Spirit produces everywhere it is being reported how they abandoned idolatry and turned to slaving for the living God and are waiting for Jesus. Paul's example went among them too. 1-12. After suffering insolent treatment at Philippi, Paul drew strength from God and preached boldly to the Thessalonians. Paul shunned flattery, covetousness, and glory-seeking. He avoided becoming a burden to the brothers, but instead treated them gently as a nursing mother would, and exhorted them as a loving father. Encouragement to remain firm in the face of persecution. 13. 3. 13. The brothers in Thessalonica, after accepting the message proclaimed to them as the word of God, were persecuted by their fellow countrymen. The same things have happened in Judea, where Christians are suffering at the hands of Jews. Paul has greatly desired to see the Thessalonians. When he could no longer bear the lack of news about them, he sent Timothy, and Timothy has just returned with good news about their spiritual condition. Paul prays for their continued increased admonition regarding attitude and conduct. 1. 5. 28. Walk more fully in the course pleasing to God. Abstain from fornication. Love the brothers to an even greater textoi acute miritra longo. Thessalonians, letters to the 1091. Background for 1 Thessalonians. Practically from the beginning, the congregation to which 1 Thessalonians was addressed experienced persecution. After arriving at Thessalonica, Paul preached in the synagogue there for 3 Sabbaths. A considerable number of persons became believers, and a congregation was established. Fanatical Jews, however, stirred up mob violence. Not finding Paul and Silas at the home of Jason, the mob dragged Jason and certain other brothers before the city rulers, accusing them of sedition. Only upon giving sufficient security were Jason and the others released. This prompted the brothers to send Paul and Silas to Berea by night, evidently for the sake of the congregation and the safety of the 2 men. Acts 17. 1-10. Thereafter, besides continued persecution. 1th 14. The congregation seemingly experienced great sorrow over losing 1/8 of their number in death. 13. Aware of the pressure that was being brought to bear against the new congregation and very much concerned about its effect, Paul dispatched Timothy to comfort and strengthen the Thessalonians. Earlier the apostle had tried to visit them twice, but Satan cut across his path. 2. 17. 3. 3. Receiving Timothy's encouraging report about the faithfulness and love of the Thessalonians, Paul rejoiced. 1th 3. 6-10 However, they needed further encouragement and admonition to resist weaknesses of the flesh. For this reason Paul, besides commending the Thessalonians for their faithful endurance 2-10, 2, 14, 3, 6-10 and comforting them with the resurrection hope 13-18, exhorted them to continue following a course approved by God and to do so more fully. 1-2 The apostle, among other things, counseled them to abstain from fornication 3-8, love one another in fuller measure, work with their hands 9-12, stay awake spiritually 6-10, have regard for those working hard among them, admonish the disorderly, speak consolingly to the depressed souls, support the weak, be long-suffering toward all, and abstain from every form of wickedness 11-22. Background for 2 Thessalonians. The faith of the Christians at Thessalonica was growing exceedingly, their love for one another was increasing, and they were continuing to endure persecution and tribulation faithfully. Therefore, the Apostle Paul, as in his first letter, commended them and encouraged them to continue standing firm. 2-1, 3-12, 2, 13-17. Some in the congregation, however, were wrongly contending that the presence of Jesus Christ was imminent. Possibly even a letter wrongly attributed to Paul was interpreted as indicating that the day of Jehovah is here. 2-2. 1-2 This may have been why the apostle made a point of the genuineness of his second letter, saying, "Here is my greeting, Paul's, in my own hand, which is a sign in every letter. This is the way I write." 3:17 Not wanting the brothers to be seduced into accepting erroneous teaching, Paul showed that other events had to precede the coming of Jehovah's day. He wrote, "It will not come a letter to correct a wrong view regarding Christ's presence and to offer counsel on how to treat disorderly persons," written by Paul shortly after his first letter to the Thessalonians. Relief to come at the revelation of Christ 1:12 The Thessalonians are commended for their endurance and faith while experiencing persecutions and distress. Relief will come at Christ's revelation. Then Jesus Christ, accompanied by powerful angels, will destroy those not obeying the good news and will be glorified in connection with his holy ones. Paul prays that the Thessalonians will be counted worthy so that the Lord Jesus' name will be glorified in the man of lawlessness to be revealed before the presence of Christ 1-17 The Thessalonians are admonished not to be unsettled or excited by any textoi acute miritra longo, Thessalonica 1092, unless the apostasy comes first and the man of lawlessness gets revealed. 2:3 A problem that had already existed earlier in the congregation still needed attention. In his first letter to the Thessalonians, Paul had told them, "We exhort you, brothers, to make it your aim to live quietly and to mind your own business and work with your hands, just as we ordered you, so that you may be walking decently as regards people outside and not be needing anything." 1-4. 10-12 There were those in the congregation who had not taken this admonition to heart. Hence Paul ordered such persons to work with quietness and eat food they had themselves earned, adding, "But if anyone is not obedient to our word through this letter, keep this one marked, stop associating with him, that he may become ashamed. And yet do not be considering him as an enemy, but continue admonishing him as a brother." 2-3. 10-15 Thessalonica Thes Nica. The principal seaport of Macedonia, where Paul established a Christian congregation about the year 50 CE. Now the city is called Thessalonica or Thessaloniki. Picture, Volume 2, p. 749. Originally, a nearby town named Therm, meaning hot spring, was one of the some 26 towns destroyed by Cassander, who then built Thessalonica in 316 or 315 BCE. He named it after his wife, the sister of Alexander the Great. This new city was situated on the W side of the Chalcidice Peninsula, on the Thermacus Sinus now called the Gulf of Salonika, at the junction between the road running into the Danube and the main road, the paved Via Egnatia built by the Romans that extended for hundreds of miles across Macedonia to the Adriatic Sea. Macedonia was divided into 4 districts before the middle of the 2nd century BCE, with Thessalonica at the capital of the second. A few years later, when Macedonia became a Roman province, Thessalonica was made the administrative seat of its provincial government. So, when the Apostle Paul and Silas arrived there, about 120 kilometers 75 MW of Philippi, they found it to be a thriving metropolis of quite some importance. For 3 Sabbaths, Paul preached in Thessalonica's synagogue. As a result, some Jews and a great multitude of Greek proselytes became believers and associated themselves with Paul and Silas. Among them were not a few of the principal women. Acts 17. 1-4 How long Paul remained there is not disclosed, though it was long enough for him and his companion to obtain work so they could support themselves. Although as an apostle Paul had the authority to receive material help from those to whom he ministered spiritual things, he set the example that a person should eat food he himself earns. 1 Co 9. 4-18. 1th2. 9. 2th3. 7-12 This was probably done partly because of the tendency toward idleness that some there had. During his stay there Paul received from the brothers in Philippi 2 different gifts supplying things he needed. php 4. 16. In time those Thessalonian Jews that rejected Paul's message rounded up a mob of idlers from the marketplace and assaulted the house of Jason where Paul was staying. But when they learned that the object of their search was not there, they dragged Jason and other believers off to the city rulers, that is, the politarchs, according to the literal Greek. Acts 17. 5-9. It is of special interest that inscriptions from that period have been found in and about Thessalonica that refer to certain of their local officials as politarchs. For safety's sake, Paul and Silas were sent away at night to Berea by the Thessalonian brothers. There Paul found the Bereans more noble-minded than those in Thessalonica, in that they not only received the word with great eagerness, but also carefully examined the scriptures daily as to whether what the apostle said was so. Soon, however, trouble developed when opposing Jews arrived from Thessalonica and stirred up the mob. O textoi acute miritra longo, Thi 1093 Thudas 3rd. A rebel who started an insurrection with a following of about 400 men sometime before 6 CE by using this Thudas as his first example of a movement that caused no more trouble after its leader was put to death. The Pharisee Gamaliel persuaded the Sanhedrin not to bother the youthful Christian congregation so soon after Jesus' death. Act 5. 34-40. Thief. One who deliberately takes that which belongs to another without permission, especially one who practices fraud and deception or who steals secretly. The ways of thieves were much the same in the past as today. They came to steal usually at night. Job 24. 14. Jah 49. 9. Mount 24. 43. Lu 12. 39. Joe 10. 10. 1th5. 2-5. 2p3. 10. Re3. 3. 16. 15, and one of their common entrances was through a window. Joe 2. 9 On the other hand, robbers and highwaymen lay in wait and fell upon their victims in lonely areas, where it was virtually impossible to get help. Often they did not hesitate to use violence or to threaten and endanger the lives of those whose valuables they seized. JG 9. 25. Lu 10. 30, 36. 2 Co 11. 26. The original language terms rendered rob and robber can also refer to withholding from another what is rightfully his, or getting things from others by fraudulent means, or by appropriating to one's own use that which one was obligated to give to others. By failing to pay tithes for the support of true worship at the temple, the Jews of Malachi's time were robbing God. Mal 3. 8, 9 Proverbs 28. 24 speaks of a man robbing his father or his mother, evidently meaning depriving his parents in some way of what was rightfully theirs. Jesus Christ condemned the money changers for having made the temple into a cave of robbers. This suggests that the money changers were charging exorbitant fees for their services. Mount 21. 12, 13. In his second letter to the Corinthians, the Apostle Paul wrote, "Other congregations are robbed by accepting provisions in order to minister to you." 2 Co 11. 8 There was nothing fraudulent about Paul's receiving provisions from others. but evidently he spoke as though he had robbed those congregations in the sense of having used what he had received from them to supply his needs while laboring, not with them, but in behalf of the Corinthians. In some cases, stealing may refer to the justified act of taking what one has a right to take, the emphasis being on the stealthy manner in which the act is executed. For example, Israelites stole the body of Saul from the public square of Bethshan. 2 Sa 21. 12 The aunt of young Jehoash saved his life by stealing him away from among his brothers, who were killed by wicked Athaliah. 2 K 11. 1, 2. 2 Ch 22. 11. Condemned by God. Most of the biblical references to stealing, however, pertain to the unlawful taking of what belongs to someone else. Jehovah's law to Israel explicitly stated, "You must not steal." Acts 20. 15. 19. 11, 13. 5. 19. Mount 19. 18 A thief had to make twofold, fourfold, or as much as fivefold compensation, depending upon what the law outlined. If he could not do so, he was sold into slavery, evidently regaining his freedom upon making full compensation. Acts 22. 1-12 In addition to making compensation, the disgraced thief J2. 26 was to bring a guilt offering and have the priest make atonement for his sins. 6. 2-7. Eventually the nation of Israel came to disregard these laws, and as a consequence, Jehovah allowed robbers and thieves from within and from without to plague the nation. 28. 29, 31. Es 7. 22 Fraudulent practices, especially the oppression of poor and needy persons, became common. Issa 1. 23. 3. 14. J 7. 9-11. 21. 12. 22. 3. S 22. 29. Mic 2. 2. While the thief who steals for hunger's sake may not be as reprehensible as one who, like Achan and Judas Iscariot, steals out of greed and because of a bad heart. Joe 7. 11, 20, 21. PR 6. 30. Mount 15. 19. Joe 12. 4-6, those desiring o text to acute miritra longo, thinking ability 1094 Wild Beast and the kings of the earth with their armies. His title King of Kings and Lord of Lords is plainly announced in writing on his outer garment at the thigh, where usually the sword of authority is worn. The drawers of the priests in Israel extended from the hips and to the thighs, that is, to where the thighs ended, so that their nakedness was well covered when they served at the sanctuary and Jehovah's altar. Otherwise, they would die. Acts 28. 42, 43. When swearing an oath, a custom occasionally followed was for the swearer to put his hand under the thigh of the person to whom it was sworn. GE 24. 2-4, 9. 47. 29-31 As to the significance of this, see attitudes and gestures swearing. The practice of slapping the thigh denoted grief, sorrow, or remorse. J 31. 19. As 21. 12. Reproductive organs. The thigh being in the general area of the body in which the reproductive organs are located, offspring are said to issue out of the upper thigh. GE 46. 26. X1. 5. JG 8. 30 This sheds light on the nature of the punishment to come upon a woman found guilty of secret adultery. In case a husband suspected his wife of unfaithfulness, he was to bring her to the priest. The priest made the woman stand before Jehovah, took some holy water evidently pure, fresh water, sprinkled into it some dust from the tabernacle floor, and washed or wiped into it the cursings he had written down. After swearing to her innocence, she was required to drink the water. If guilty, her thigh fell away and her belly swelled. If she was innocent, no harm would come upon her. New 5. 12-31. What was meant by the falling away of the thigh of an adulterous woman? The thigh is apparently used as an inoffensive substitution in this passage to refer to the sexual organs. Compare GE 46. 26. Logically, the punishment affected those organs that were involved in committing the wrong. Compare Mr. 9.